Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. There is a fear in the West, in the First World. I would say particularly in the United States and Germany about failing to support Israel. If the U.S. were not sending money to Israel right now, we're not sending weapons to Israel right now, Israel could not continue its campaign in Rafah or in Gaza in general, and now in Lebanon. It is only because of the support of the US and to a lesser extent Germany that Israel is able to do what it is doing. If I were in a position of power, which is kind of laughable, given the fact that I'm a commie, a Maoist-Third worldist, if I were in power in Washington, D.C., my response, which I guess is supposedly or conceivably unimaginable to most other people in Washington or to most other people in general, would be, maybe if I do not support Israel, I will lose the support of AIPAC. But AIPAC is not and does not represent the majority of Americans. And even if failing to support Israel would lead to President Biden losing the election, which I don't think is true at all. In fact, I think quite the opposite, that his support of Israel is leading to his rapidly declining poll numbers, especially among young Democrats. And I say that as somebody who is not a Democrat or a Republican or anything else. I am a Maoist-Third worldist, critical realist, a socialist, and a communist. But again, my response, if I were President Biden, would be better to lose an election than to lose my own soul. And I fear that that is precisely what is happening to many people right now. They have stated their priorities. They have established themselves as atheists. And when I use the term atheist, I am not using it in the usual sense as somebody who disbelieves in God, which I guess literally is what atheist is. Theist, a believer in God, you put the A before it, and that negates it. But when I say atheist, I mean somebody who does not fear God. And if one fears God, recognizes that God can punish people and will punish people if they deserve it, and especially if they are helping to attack the meek, in Gaza, and now in the part of Gaza called Rafah, that they will face that punishment. That punishment, I think, is coming soon. As you know, I don't like making predictions, and so this is not really a prediction. It's what my heart is telling me. As I mentioned before, I will no longer separate my communism from my spirituality, which I had been doing up till this point. I still will not mention my religion by name, for reasons I mentioned before. But I see so many people who seem willing to give up their basic love of humanity, if they even had a love of humanity to begin with. I don't know. In order to please, I don't know who. Israel? Surely Biden must know that by supporting Israel, his chances of winning re-election, are declining day by day. Now, it is not as if I support Biden, but also it is not as if I support Trump. I am neutral on that issue, completely and totally neutral. Why? Because I believe that ultimately we make our own futures to a large extent. And the dialectic, which is one of the causal mechanisms of the universe, responds in a way which is often unpredictable. So we don't necessarily know what the consequences will be of Biden and his administration supporting Israel, or of Benjamin Netanyahu and his administration carrying out the war or the terrorist campaign on Gaza. Those are mysteries. Those are things that we have no way of knowing. To be honest, I would not want to know. I really would not want to know. Those are things that would bring me great sadness were I to find out about the suffering of people, any people. I do not like suffering. I would rather see people prosper. I would genuinely prosper. But certainly now, the people of Gaza and specifically of Rafah are not prospering. They are dying. They are dying. As I said before, they are drinking seawater, or they are drinking water, the same water that was used with tampons. That is their drinking water in many cases. Little babies, including those in incubators, are dying. And why? Well, I think it's 3 countries: Israel, the US, and Germany. that take most of the blame. Primarily Israel, because Bibi Netanyahu is carrying out the war or terrorist campaign. But the United States and Germany still have a lot to do with it. And I don't know how much more time they have. But I don't want to see them suffer either. I am not a vindictive person. I am not somebody who wishes pain or schadenfreude on other people. My temperament is not defined by schadenfreude at all. I despise schadenfreude. No respectable individual should be motivated by a desire to see other people suffer or to take pleasure in the suffering of others, even of one's enemies. So for that reason, I don't wish harm to come to Netanyahu, Biden, or anyone else. I just want them to stop what they are doing. They are literally facilitating the extermination of an entire third world population. And how can they do that? How can they possibly have any inclination to make other human beings suffer? And surely they know they are doing that, and they don't care. The IDF has said on camera how proud it is of killing, of massacring Palestinians. And still, most Israelis support the terrorist campaign against the Gazans. So I would say that at this point in my life, my faith in humanity is very low. Honestly, it has never been that high to begin with. When, as an autistic child, I was beaten every school day walking home from school, when I was beaten by my father, when I was emotionally abused by my mother, all at a time when the concept of child abuse, the term child abuse, had not even been coined. So I began from a point of very limited faith in humanity. And now, seeing what is happening right now in Gaza brings me back to that time. Not only does it remind me of my own sufferings, which I suppose is a kind of empathy, but it makes me think of the suffering of people that I could never be like. As an American, as a guy born and raised in New York City, born in Manhattan, raised in the Bronx and Queens, the situation being faced by the Gazans is literally unimaginable to me. but I can still appreciate it, I can understand it, and I can cry for it. Not doing so, and apparently Joe Biden can't do it. There is a sense of shame which some people have. Sadly, not everyone does. And it would appear that neither Biden nor Netanyahu have that sense of shame. And that is so tragic. Not primarily for them, although sure, for them as well, but because of that absence of shame, that dialectical absence of shame is hurting so many innocents. And from a critical realist perspective, every absence needs to be absented. I don't know what the absenting of shame would look like. All I can think of is love. I guess love would absent the need for shame or the feeling of shame. And ultimately, the product would be a transformed human being. Roy Bhaskar, the Marxist founder of critical realism, said that the process of the dialectic, the process of critical realism itself, begins with the individual. It must begin with the individual. And then, hopefully, it will then begin with societies as a whole. But the sad thing is that is not happening right now. Am I confident that it will happen? Honestly, no. And as I said before, I don't like making predictions or prognostications. First, because I don't think that we human beings are capable of making them successfully. They're just guesses, unless they're based on statistics and something like multiple regression, path analysis, or factor analysis. But I can look at the present, and I can see where the world is right now. And the world is not in a place that makes me very happy or very joyful. And so I find it hard to imagine how the world can get from where it is now to where I think it needs to be, which is in a place of love, empathy, compassion, and loving kindness. But we're not there now. And honestly, I think that before we get there, the capitalist world system, the first world, the empire, needs in some way to have its power snatched from below them. I wish that would happen now. I really do. I wish that the first world would have its power taken away in this very moment. But sadly, that is not my decision, and it is nothing that I have the power to do. So, as an individual, all I can do from a spiritual perspective is to talk about the fear of God and the fact that people like Biden, people like Netanyahu and more don't have it. And that is why they're committing the atrocious acts that they are. People who claim to be theists but engage in behavior which is literally inhuman, like supporting Israel right now, are not theists. They are truly atheists. I wish they were not, but it is their decision what to make of their lives, not mine. I wish that I could do something. I don't know what that would be, but I really wish that there was even a minor activity I could engage in that would reduce the suffering of the Gazans and of the third world in general. But I can't. All I can do is to try to engage in conscientization, the process of critical conscience and consciousness raising, as it was discussed by the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire, a wonderful man, a spiritual Marxist in many ways, like Roy Bhaskar, in many ways like me. He was an educator and he was also a Marxist. He was an educator and he was also a devout spiritual person. He found a way to blend those things, as did Roy Bhaskar. And all I can do in my life is to try to learn from them and to emulate them. I don't feel, and I'm being totally honest, I don't feel as though I am doing a sufficient job, because I am living here right now. Paulo Freire and Roy Bhaskar are both deceased. There's nothing they can do from it here, but I should be able to, because I am alive right now when this massacre is occurring. And yet, sadly, I find myself in the position of literally not knowing what to do. And to me, that is the greatest tragedy I could possibly imagine. For now, this is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have as pleasant a day as you can, and perhaps an even better day tomorrow.